can't. I've got too much to do. Listen, don't mention the war. I mentioned it once, but I think I got away with it all right.
The only real difference between him and Basil is that he was small and had a very large henpecking wife.
It was one of the greatest British sitcoms ever made. A series so sharp, so gloriously chaotic, that people are still quoting it decades later. Yet it existed for only 12 episodes and then vanished, leaving everyone wondering why a show that brilliant disappeared so quickly. And what really happened around the episode, people say almost destroyed it. The story begins in 1970, when John Cleese and the Monty Python team were in Torquay filming Monty Python's Flying Circus, and checked into what they thought was a normal seaside hotel, the Gleneagles, only to find it run by an owner so rude and paranoid he felt like a living cartoon. Donald Sinclair, the manager, treated paying guests as if they were a nuisance, barking at them over tiny things and turning basic hospitality into a minefield. Eric Idle once left his briefcase in the lobby and, instead of treating it like lost property, Sinclair marched it outside and hurled it over a wall because he'd convinced himself it was a bomb, while Terry Gilliam had his knife and fork corrected mid-meal, as if bad cutlery etiquette were a criminal offense. Cleese watched this unfold in disbelief and, with his eye for absurd detail, began quietly making notes. Years later, he and his then-wife, Connie Booth, turned that bizarre stay into the blueprint for Basil Fawlty, the furious, snobbish, catastrophically incompetent hotelier at the heart of Fawlty Towers, which first aired on BBC Two in 1975. Together, Cleese and Booth created a show that combined farce, slapstick, and verbal wit, with characters so exaggerated they felt uncomfortably real. Basil, seething with class anxiety and barely contained rage. Sybil, played by Prunella Scales, whose shrill "Basil" could stop him dead. Manuel, the well-meaning but constantly confused Spanish waiter, brought to life by Andrew Sachs. And Polly, Connie Booth's calm, capable waitress, who was often the only functioning adult in the building. At first, critics didn't know what to make of it. Some dismissed the first series as messy or too frantic. Yet audiences loved watching everything go wrong, as Basil tried and failed to impress guests, climb the social ladder, and keep his temper under control. The BBC even hesitated over a second series, only changing their minds after reruns and word of mouth turned the show into a cult favorite, leading to a delayed second run in 1979. By then, Cleese and Booth had divorced in 1978, but still chose to write and work together, putting personal pain aside to finish what they had started. Behind the laughter, there was physical sacrifice, too. Sachs endured real injuries, including being accidentally hit with a metal frying pan in one take before they switched to a rubber prop, and even suffering burns during a kitchen fire scene. Yet, he kept going, and turned Manuel into one of British TV's most beloved comic creations. The series' most infamous episode, The Germans, pushed Fawlty Towers to the edge of cancellation and later censorship. In it, Basil, concussed and even more unhinged than usual, tries to tell his staff, "Don't mention the war," before repeatedly mentioning it himself, stumbling into grotesque small talk with German guests, and finally goose-stepping through the lobby in a ridiculous Hitler impersonation. Many viewers understood that the joke was on Basil's stupidity and post-war British awkwardness, not on the Germans themselves. And the episode became iconic, but some critics and viewers, especially those sensitive to World War II memories, found it offensive or tasteless, and complaints flooded the BBC. Decades later, as attitudes around comedy and stereotypes shifted, that same episode was temporarily pulled or edited by some broadcasters and streaming services, with certain lines removed sparking a new wave of debate about whether classic comedy should be altered. Manuel's character also came under later scrutiny, with arguments over whether he was a harmless, affectionate portrayal of a confused foreign worker or a stereotype that hadn't aged well. Even though Cleese always insisted the target of the satire was Basil's arrogance and ignorance, not Manuel or the Germans. Away from the controversies, the cast led rich, complicated lives. John Cleese went on to co-create and star in the hit film A Fish Called Wanda. In 1988, lend his voice to characters like King Harold in Shrek 2 and Kaa in The Jungle Book in 1994, and remain a sharp, outspoken figure in debates about comedy and so-called cancel culture. In 2023, he surprised fans by announcing a planned revival of Fawlty Towers, due in 2024, co-starring his real-life daughter Camilla Cleese and imagining Basil in the modern world, a prospect that excites some and deeply worries others who see the original as untouchable. Connie Booth walked away from show business almost entirely, retrained as a psychotherapist, and chose a quiet, private life, rarely giving interviews and politely distancing herself from the Fawlty Towers spotlight. Prunella Scales enjoyed a long, acclaimed career in projects like Map and Lucia, 1985, and the film Howard's End, 1992, before later facing vascular dementia. Her husband, Timothy West, has spoken movingly about how, even as her memory fades, her wit and warmth still shine through. Andrew Sachs continued working in series like Coronation Street and even appeared in Doctor Who, before his death in 2016 at the age of 86. Also from vascular dementia, leaving behind a legacy of one of TV's greatest physical comedians. Ballard Berkeley, who played the gently unhinged Major Gowan, died in 1988, but is still remembered for his doddery, outdated ex-soldier, whose lines would be impossible to write today. Brian Hall, who played Terry the Chef, carried on acting until his death in 1997, while Gilly Flower and Renee Roberts, unforgettable as the elderly Miss Tibbs and Miss Gatsby, continued to work before passing away in 2009 and 2010. Fawlty Towers had gone from a series some critics didn't get to being ranked by the British Film Institute as the greatest British television series of all time. And now, nearly 50 years after it first aired, Basil's rants, Sybil's barbs, Manuel's K, and Polly's dry one-liners are still quoted daily, proving that even though one episode nearly got it pulled, and modern sensibilities keep dragging it back into controversy, truly great comedy doesn't disappear. It just keeps exploding with laughter in every new generation that discovers it.